Athens, Rome. Their ruins still scream of past glory, the Colosseum, the Parthenon, stones that have witnessed millions of footsteps and thousands of years of history. But what remains of Sparta? Once a superpower that held all of Greece in fear? Almost nothing. Just a few modest ruins lost in the southern Peloponnese, a ghost of a city rather than a thriving metropolis. And therein lies the greatest mystery. How did a civilization that flourished for half a millennium and served as the center of power in the Mediterranean simply vanish? Dissolve into history, leaving behind only legends of fearless warriors. The first clue to unraveling this mystery lies in the fact that we don't even know their true name. They rarely referred to themselves as Spartans. That was a nickname given to them by others. They called themselves Lacedaemonians. This is why their famous shields bore the letter lambda, the first letter of Lacedaemon. This isn't just a quirky detail. It's the first key that tells us everything we think we know about Sparta. From the film 300 Spartans to our school textbooks is only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lies something far stranger and more brutal. One man was behind this peculiar system, the legendary lawmaker Lycurgus. He didn't just draft a set of laws, he completely transformed society, turning it into the most efficient military machine of the ancient world. Starting at the age of 7, boys were taken from their mothers and thrown into the agog, a brutal training regimen designed to strip away their humanity, compassion, fear, individuality. They learned to steal to survive. They faced off in brutal fights against one another. Hunger, cold, and pain forged their bodies and spirits. The goal was singular: to create not citizens, but perfect soldiers, living weapons. Lycurgus didn't build a nation. He constructed a barracks the size of a state. To grasp this chilling madness, we must first look at the world they inhabited. Ancient Greece wasn't a peaceful union of shared values and harmonious trade. Forget that image. It was a battleground for gladiators where countless city-states, polis, fought relentlessly for dominance. Athens, Thebes, Corinth, Argos, all were bound by language and gods, yet they remained deadly enemies. In this boiling cauldron of constant warfare where the weak faced immediate destruction, Lycurgus's radical system wasn't just a whim, it was the only path to survival. And not merely to survive, but to dominate. For centuries, this system functioned flawlessly. For 500 years, the Spartans reigned as undisputed masters of land warfare. Their phalanx was a force to be reckoned with. They served as judges, executioners, and hegemons of the Greek world. But this machine, engineered solely for relentless conflict, stood on the brink of its greatest triumph, a war that would cement their dominance over all of Hellas. Yet what happens to a mechanism designed only for war when it finally achieves complete, crushing, and definitive victory? This mechanism achieved its intended purpose. It sparked its own war. Not just another clash over disputed territory, but a battle for the soul of the entire Greek world, the Peloponnesian War. This wasn't merely a confrontation of armies, it was a collision of two universes. On one side stood Athens, a maritime empire, a beacon of democracy, a cradle of philosophy backed by a navy that ruled the waves. On the other side lay Sparta, a land-based oligarchy defined by discipline, featuring a phalanx that crushed everything in its path. It was a showdown of colossal proportions, David versus Goliath. Two titans, unable to coexist in the same world, faced off in a struggle destined to crown only one victor. This conflict stood apart from all that came before it. Sure, it stretched on for nearly 3 decades, pulling in everyone from Sicily to Asia Minor. This was total war, a Greek version of a world conflict. But for Sparta, the stakes soared to unimaginable heights. For Athens, defeat meant losing their empire and influence. For the Spartans, it meant complete annihilation. Their brutal system, their entire society relied on the oppression of a much larger population of enslaved helots. Their reputation for invincibility held them together. One loss, one crack in their armor, and their state could vanish in a bloody uprising. They gambled everything, their present, their future, their very existence. After 27 years of unimaginable bloodshed, after the plague in Athens, after betrayals and brutality, and after entire generations grew up knowing nothing but war, Sparta emerged victorious, completely, unconditionally. In 404 BC, the walls of Athens crumbled to the sound of Spartan flutes. Their fleet burned to ashes. Their empire vanished. The Lacedaemonians stood at the pinnacle of the world. They achieved a goal centuries in the making, becoming the absolute hegemon of Hellas. And here begins the real mystery. If they triumphed, if they crushed their greatest enemy and attained everything they desired, then why did their rapid descent into obscurity start right at this moment? The most ironic part of this story lies in how people usually explain it. Historians often cite the reasons for Sparta's decline: a demographic crisis, meaning a shortage of citizen soldiers, economic weakness and rigidity, an inability to govern a vast empire. That sounds logical, but there's a massive flaw in this reasoning. All these points perfectly describe the reasons behind Athens' defeat, not Sparta's. Athens lost a third of its population to the plague. Athens ran out of money in its treasury. Athens alienated its allies through brutality. In contrast, Sparta emerged from the war at the height of its power. So clearly, the conventional explanation doesn't hold up. The reason for their downfall had nothing to do with weakness. It stemmed from their very victory. But how did a landlocked state, one that scorned money and trade, manage to defeat the wealthiest maritime empire on its own turf, the sea? The Spartan phalanx proved ineffective against the Athenian ships. To secure victory, Sparta needed its own fleet, a fleet that could challenge the Athenian armada. Building hundreds of war triremes and supporting thousands of rowers demanded colossal sums that Sparta simply didn't have. So, where did the money come from? Who provided this impoverished agrarian state with the resources to crush a financial and naval giant? The answer to this question is both simple and strikingly cynical. While the two Greek titans, Athens and Sparta, bled on the stage of history, a third player lurked in the shadows. This wasn't just an observer. This was someone who stoked the flames and pulled the strings. This player was the sworn enemy of all Greece, the very one they had collectively banished from their lands just a generation prior. The Persian Empire, the entire Peloponnesian War, this brutal nightmare, unfolded like a grand puppet show, with the Persian king as its master director. For the Persians, the Greeks were an everlasting headache, a noisy, proud, and defiant problem on their western frontier. They had already failed in a direct invasion, so why take that risk again? It was far smarter and more effective to provoke the Greeks into destroying themselves. This strategy was brilliantly cruel, a war to the last Hellen. The Persians opened their treasury and began methodically fueling the conflict, transforming it into an endless meat grinder. Their goal wasn't merely to defeat Sparta. They aimed for the complete exhaustion of all of Greece. After decades of war, they envisioned a land lying at their feet, weak, drained, and ready to submit to any command. The main beneficiary of Persian gold became Sparta. This land-based power, which once scorned wealth as a source of corruption, suddenly gained access to virtually limitless resources. That gold flowed like lifeblood through the veins of their military machine. With those Persian derricks, the Spartans built hundreds of triremes, a fleet capable of challenging the Athenian armada. They hired thousands of the finest rowers from across the Mediterranean. The Spartan phalanx transformed into a colossal golem fueled by Persian finances and directed toward its primary enemy, Athens. Every Spartan victory at sea came at the expense of their age-old rival's treasury. This wasn't a triumph of Spartan spirit, it was a triumph of Persian wealth. And so, the war's over. Athens has fallen, Sparta stands as the new hegemon, but at what cost? Nearly 3 decades of conflict left Greece in ruins. Fields lay scorched, cities lay in tatters, and an entire generation of men lay buried in the ground. In this deafening silence of exhaustion, a new voice emerged. The voice of the true victor. According to the terms of the so-called King's Peace, or Antalcidas' peace, the guarantor of order in Greece became the Persian king, the very king that the Greeks had once defeated. Now, he dictated terms to the victors. The Greek cities in Asia Minor returned to Persian control. Sparta, having won the war, effectively traded the independence of all Greece for the right to crush its rival. Sparta, the conqueror, began its descent into oblivion, becoming a puppet in foreign hands and losing everything that defined its identity. Its story was nearly at an end. But here arises the final, most profound paradox. If victory destroyed Sparta, what should have happened to Athens after its crushing defeat? Their walls crumbled, their fleet burned, their empire vanished, and their democracy humiliated. By all logic, Athens should have disappeared forever. Yet they not only survived, they outlasted their victor for centuries. So why did the system that lost the war prove to be more resilient than the one that won? The answer lies not on the battlefields, but on the map, and in the very essence of two cities. Athens served as a gateway to the world. Its port, Piraeus, pulsed with the lifeblood of trade, ideas, and wealth flowing throughout the Mediterranean. Even with its walls in ruins and its fleet in ashes, that connection to the world endured. It was in their DNA. Sparta, on the other hand, was a fortress, locked within itself. Landlocked and isolated in its valley, it looked inward rather than outward. During the war, this isolation was a strength, but once the cannons fell silent, it became a deadly trap. The economy of Sparta resembled a perfect racing car, an exquisite machine designed for a singular purpose: to conquer the battlefield. It was incredibly fast, efficient, and unbeatable in its element. In contrast, the economy of Athens resembled an all-terrain vehicle. It might not have been the quickest on the track, but it could navigate anywhere through the mountains of trade, across the swamps of diplomacy, and across the deserts of crisis. Then, the war ended. The race was over. What does a racing car do on a regular road? It can't haul cargo, it can't plow a field, it simply sits in the garage and rusts. But the all-terrain vehicle, it drives on, discovering new paths. With the Spartan war machine sidelined by the absence of conflict, it ground to a halt and began to consume itself. Meanwhile, Athens, having lost its empire, pivoted to trade and culture and thrived. And so began a long, painful decline. The world transformed, but Sparta remained frozen in time. A new predator emerged, Alexander the Great. He united Greece through fire and sword. City-states fell in line, all except one. Sparta stood proud and refused to submit, but her defiance no longer held weight. She had grown too weak. Alexander dismissed her like an old lion stripped of its teeth and led the Greeks eastward to exact vengeance on the Persians. Then the Romans arrived. For them, Sparta had lost its status as a formidable foe and had become a living museum, an historical relic. Tourists flocked to witness the once mighty warriors, now mere shadows of their ancestors. Great Sparta didn't fall in battle. It quietly faded away, succumbing to oblivion and its own inability to adapt. Yet, neither Macedonia nor Rome served as the primary cause of Greece's demise. They simply delivered the final blows to a civilization that was already lifeless. The true nail in the coffin of classical Greece was driven a century earlier, the Peloponnesian War. This 30-year nightmare of fratricidal conflict, expertly fueled by Persian gold, acted like a systemic virus that obliterated the immune system of Hellenic civilization. It shattered everything: trust, alliances, the economy, and faith in the future. Sparta, with its rigid and fragile structure, collapsed first. It may have won battles, but the war unleashed by its enemies ultimately destroyed its very world. The irony of history is that Alexander the Great, in his conquest of both weakened Greece and its treacherous puppeteer, Persia, unwittingly sealed the cycle of tragedy. He became the final act in a drama that the Greeks had written for themselves.